What's going on, everyone? So, the New York Knicks are monitoring the trade status of Minnesota Timberwolves star Karl Anthony Towns. The New York Post, Stefan Bondi reports. Towns is a potential Knicks trade target, according to Bondi. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves, this is something that I've talked about, right? Minnesota, according to ESPN, is going to be the number one team in the Western Conference. I don't personally believe that. I don't personally buy that. I do think Minnesota has the potential to be pretty good, right? I do think Minnesota has the potential to maybe, depending on the right matchup, even maybe make an upset or, get to the second round or, the dominoes kind of fall your way. Maybe you get to the conference finals. I mean, we've seen teams like Atlanta, Dallas last couple years make it. Anything could happen. I don't want to say and just completely write them off, but I think realistically they're probably somewhere in like the 5 to 8 range in the Western Conference. I just don't think Rudy Gobert was the answer to the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? I thought Minnesota was heading in the right direction. I think they just needed to stay the course. They felt the need to expedite this, and they went and got a guy that took away a lot of what made Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards great. Now, in their defense, Karl Anthony Towns played 29 games last year. So it's not like they had a huge sample size to figure it out and play together and kind of navigate the course of the season. But still, right? Like, one of the things that makes Karl Anthony Towns great is his ability as a center to stretch the floor and knock down threes and just outside shots equivalent to many guards in the league, right? But when he goes and he becomes just a primary perimeter player, then he just becomes another guy, right? You're not utilizing his size in the way that you would if he was at the center position. You're not stretching the floor and running 5 wide like you would if he's at the center position, right? And Rudy Gobert, his inability to be an offensive threat and spread the floor really limits you. I understand the idea of Rudy Gobert, right? Because Minnesota, they needed shot blocking, they needed perimeter toughness and defense, and they also needed rebounding. And Rudy was an idea that would have got one. I thought that they crazily overpaid for that. But beyond that, I understand the idea. But again, you take away what made Anthony Edwards or what made Karl Anthony Towns such a mismatch, right? It was his ability to be able to dominate in the interior, in the post, and he could go out to the perimeter rather than now he's out in the perimeter. And if you want to, he can dominate in the post, right? There's a big difference to that. Also, the other thing is with Anthony Edwards is you basically took away one of his biggest weapons, right? Because you could pull Karl Anthony Towns out, you basically gave Anthony Edwards a free lane to the basket whenever he felt like it. And we even saw last year at times he was hesitant or it'd be a little awkward because you got this giant tree in the middle of the court that you have to navigate around, or he has to get out the way, or it just makes things awkward and complicated. And teams don't have to go out and challenge Rudy Gobert because you'll live with it. If Anthony Edwards comes and drives to the lane and he kicks it out while you come as a help defender, and if Rudy Gobert wants to pull up and try to shoot it, who cares? Let him shoot it. If he makes it, congratulations. But more times than not, he's probably not hitting that shot because it's not his game, right? So now Anthony Edwards has to take a step back. He has to adjust his game. He becomes more of a spot-up shooter and stuff. Luckily, he is still very good at that, and he was still able to be super effective, but you basically took away a lot of what made your team great. Here's the problem. If the Minnesota Timberwolves don't work out this season, the only option you have to get out of it is trading Karl Anthony Towns, because you're not going to be able, you're not trading Anthony Edwards, and nobody's going to give you anything of like significant value for Rudy Gobert. Sure, could you get off of Rudy Gobert for like pennies on the dollar? Possibly. I'm sure there's a team that would take him if he's essentially free, or if like you had to attach or were willing to attach some assets to make it happen. But then like you're in big trouble where maybe you could turn Karl Anthony Towns into several pieces, right? Like, can you turn Karl Anthony Towns into, I don't know, like a Grimes, maybe Robinson and or a Barrett? Like, could you do something like that, right? To where now you kind of have like this young core, this young group, right? You got, Anthony Edwards with Grimes and RJ Barrett, and you still got, a nice young backup center for Rudy Gobert. So like, you always have a big on the court that can block shots or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing out stuff, and then get a bunch of draft picks, because you probably get a pretty solid return for Karl Anthony Towns. But I don't see a way out for Minnesota other than trading Cat, right? And from the Knicks' perspective, your mistake is our gain, is the way that they look at it. I don't really know how Karl Anthony Towns would necessarily work with that team, because he's not a great defensive player and he's not a great rebounder for his side. Like that, again, that was one of the big problems. That's why they went and got Rudy Gobert, right? But he is an incredible talent. I do definitely think the Knicks would be better. I just worry like your backcourt defense is a bit of a liability, and now your front court defense would be a big liability. Like, I just don't think the Knicks would be very good defensively, which would be a problem. And how good is Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns as a duo, right? Because I mean, Jalen Brunson isn't better than Anthony Edwards, right? And Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns were, essentially I mean, granted it's the West rather than the East, but still, like, okay, let's say the Knicks are like the 5th seed or the 4th seed in the East, right? Like, I don't think Karl Anthony Towns makes the Knicks a contender. I think it makes the Knicks very exciting. I think it makes the Knicks a lot of fun. I think that, many people, I think it would add, some real excitement to New York and give New York some hope and just things like that. And it's like, what else are you going to get, right? Unless, a Joel Embiid or a Giannis becomes available, right? But, I mean, Milwaukee just got Damian Lillard, so, you'd imagine that that's a pretty significant piece to kind of keep Giannis happy to an extent, to where he's probably not leaving. And then from a Sixers situation, right? I mean, James Harden, whether it's this year or next, he's likely gone at some point. Does Joel Embiid finally want out? But he hasn't really shown any inclination, even through all the drama and just chaos and stuff. He's been pretty willing to, hold tight and stand pat and ride with the Sixers. So that kind of puts you in a tough situation if you're them. I don't know. I just, again, I don't hate the idea of them going and getting Karl Anthony Towns. I think if you're the Knicks, I think you almost have to, personally. But I don't think it's something that makes them so significantly better that now all of a sudden they're a contender. But the way you could look at it is they got Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. Whatever they give up is what they give up. And then they can kind of maybe build a proper team around those guys and kind of put themselves in a nice position. That could be a real possibility. I mean, that's something that could end up working out for them. Time will tell, but I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Timberwolves kind of work out this year. It's going to be interesting to see what the Knicks end up doing, because the Knicks are kind of just waiting around for that big name player to kind of become available, right? Like, that's kind of what the deal is with them, right? Just staying patient, remaining patient, waiting for that guy to become available that they can kind of throw their chips at the table. They got plenty of draft picks, plenty of young players and talent that many teams would be excited in, that they could probably work out. So, I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you think, like the Knicks should go all in for Karl Anthony Towns if he becomes available? Do you think the Timberwolves, like they're going to have to trade Cat at some point? Or do you think like you just kind of live with your mistake and ride it out? You don't trade Karl Anthony Towns? I mean, because that is always another option. I don't know if that would be the best option, right? Not if you're really trying to contend, right, and trying to build around Anthony Edwards. I think you just kind of move off a Cat, get younger, kind of hit the rebuild button. Maybe you get some nice quality pieces, to put around Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. You kind of have like because I mean, look, I mean Utah was pretty good with Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and Anthony Edwards. You know, if he can kind of, you'd imagine he's only going to continue to improve and get better. So maybe you can kind of create like an upgraded version of the Utah Jazz, right? With Gobert and Anthony Edwards. It's definitely a possibility. I could see something along those lines, but I don't know. I'm just not super stoked out of the way. But anyway, again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments section below.